Welcome aboard the dark waters of the Night Crew podcast, where true crime meets the unknown. Each month we dive into the eerie, the unsolved, and the stories that haunt the shadows. If it's creepy, mysterious, or just plain unsettling, you'll find it here. So light your lantern, step onto the deck, and prepare to uncover what lies beneath the surface.
This podcast contains discussions of true crime, disturbing content, and mature themes that may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is strongly advised. The Night Crew podcast aims to present stories with respect to the victims and their families, and the intent is never to sensationalize tragedy, but to shed light on the unknown and unexplained. Welcome to today's episode of The Night Crew. We're on episode 13, and what better way to celebrate the number 13 than talk about one of the Conjuring stories, the Smurl family haunting. So we're diving into one of the most infamous and terrifying hauntings in American history, the Smurl family haunting in West Pittston, Pennsylvania. The Smurl haunting is the real-life case that's believed to be the inspiration for the upcoming Conjuring Last Rites movie, which hits the theaters September 5th. I can't wait to see it. It's the last one of the series, so I'm excited. But this case, the reason the Ed and Lorraine Warren quit everything, or like this was one of their last cases. That's what I'm trying to say. And there's a reason for that. So as I was researching what to talk about today, I didn't even realize this story had to even do with the Conjuring movie, so I did not pick it on purpose, but it is very interesting, very scary. So, imagine moving into your dream home, a place where you hope your children will grow up safely, only to discover that the walls themselves are alive with something so dark and malevolent. This is the story of Jack and Janet Smurl, their 4 daughters, and a presence that would terrorize them for over a decade. Janet once said, "I thought I was moving into a home, not a nightmare." The Smurl haunting is a chilling tale of fear, faith, and the unknown. It's a story that combines ordinary family life with extraordinary horror, and it's all reported to be real. So we're going to start with the family and the house. The Smurfs were, by all accounts, a typical American family. Jack Smurl worked as a technician, and Janet stayed home with their 4 daughters, Dawn, Heather, and twins, Shannon and Karen. In 1973, after losing their first home in flooding caused by Hurricane Agnes, they purchased a modest duplex at 328 K Street in West Pittston, Pennsylvania. Before Jack and Janet Smurl moved in, along with their daughters, the house at 328 Chase Street had already stood for over 6 decades. Built around 1910, it sat atop a patch of land with a long and turbulent history. Beneath the property were old coal mine tunnels, remnants of the region's mining boom. These tunnels, some unstable and abandoned, became a part of local folklore. Residents whispered that strange energies seemed to linger over old mine areas, a combination of underground voids, residual trauma from accidents, and the human activity that had scarred the land permanently. Before the Smurl family moved into their duplex at 328 Chase Street in 1973, the land had already bore witnesses to decades of turmoil and tragedy. The region, nestled in the heart of Pennsylvania's coal country, was no stranger to the perils and misfortunes that often accompanied industrial progress. So I'm going to go more into the legacy of coal mining and how that plays a role in the haunting of this house. So the Wyoming Valley, encompassing West Pittston, was historically dominated by coal mining. Beneath the surface of Chase Street lay a network of abandoned coal mine tunnels, remnants of the area's once thriving mining industry. So these patches These passages underneath the house, the tunnels, some dating back to the early 20th century, were prone to collapse and flooding. The most infamous of these incidents was the Knox mine disaster of 1959, where a mining operation beneath the Susquehanna River led to a catastrophic flood, drowning 12 miners and causing widespread devastation. While the Knox disaster occurred several miles from Chase Street, the region's mining infrastructure was interconnected. The collapse of one mine could have ripple effects, potentially impacting neighboring areas. The presence of these tunnels beneath the Smurl residence may have possibly contributed to the house's instability and the paranormal phenomena reported by the family. And there's also a lot of local folklore and superstitions. The coal mining communities of northeastern Pennsylvania were steeped with folklore, much of it centered around the supernatural. Stories of Tommy knockers, mythical creatures believed to inhabit mines, and warn miners of impending danger were prevalent. These tales, passed down through many generations, reflected the community's deep-seated fears and respect for the unseen forces lurking beneath the earth. Such folklore often blurred the lines between myth and reality, and it's conceivable that the Smurls, upon experiencing unexplained events in their new home, might have been influenced by these local legends. The belief in entities like Tommyknockers could have provided a framework for interpreting their experiences, whether they were rooted in reality or the product of heightened emotions and suggestibility. Now I will go into the house's architecture and previous occupants. And all of this is pretty important because I was confused how the house was haunted when I first heard about The Conjuring coming out. Because really they don't go much into that in those movies. They just kind of try to make it scary. So this would be beneficial if you will see that movie, just to know the history behind it and whatnot. But either way, the duplex at 328 Chase Street, constructed around 1910, was a typical example of early 20th century working class housing. Its design, while modest, reflected the era's architectural trends. However, the house's age and construction might have played a role in the disturbances reported by the Smurls. For example, older homes often have creaky floors, settling foundations, and other characteristics that can produce sounds easily misinterpreted as supernatural. Moreover, the house's history of previous tenants, some of whom reported strange occurrences, suggests that the property might have been predisposed to such events. Whether these earlier residents experienced genuine paranormal activity or were influenced by the house's atmosphere and local legends remains a topic of debate. Previous tenants reportedly experienced unexplained noises and disturbances, though few spoke about it publicly. Neighbors recalled hearing banging from the house at odd hours, lights flickering, and doors opening and closing without explanation. Some older locals suggested that the property had been the site of tragedies in the early 20th century, though records were sparse. Paranormal experts, including Lorraine Warren and Ed, speculated that the house may have absorbed negative energy over decades, creating a fertile ground for a malevolent entity. Lorraine noted, some houses carry energy from the past, some of it benign, some of it dark. This one was a little different. It had the capacity for hatred, and it knew how to find its victims. It was smart. Even before the Smurls lived there, the house seemed to repel joy and comfort. Objects would reportedly fall without cause, there would be unexplained cold spots, and some claimed to see fleeting shadows in corners of rooms. While it may have been dormant at times, the location itself seemed to be holding a lingering malevolence. one that would soon fixate on the family that moved in 1973. Janet Smurl, the wife, would later say, "It felt as though the house was waiting for us to live there so it could finally reveal itself." By exploring the house's dark history, we begin to understand why the Smurls' experience escalated so quickly and why the entity seemed so focused. The house wasn't just haunted, it was primed for a confrontation with the living. Janet remembered, "At first, it seemed perfect, but almost immediately the house felt wrong. You could feel it in your bones." The house had no reputation for tragedy. Locals confirmed it had simply been another family home. Jack and Janet hoped for stability, but the duplex would soon transform into the epicenter of a terrifying ordeal. Now, for the rest of the podcast, there's a lot of quotes I'm going to be saying from all the people in the story and whatnot, because you can't really write much about this unless you put the quotes in it, because that truly tells a story and what happened to them and everything. So with that being said, we're going to go into the early signs of paranormal activity. At first, the disturbances were subtle. Stains appeared on walls, foul odors would fill rooms and vanish, scratching and banging sounds seemed to come from nowhere. Appliances acted strangely, lights flickered, the television switched channels by itself, and radios turned on and off. The family dog refused to enter certain rooms, growling at invisible threats. Animals always know when there's a presence there. Janet, the wife, recalled, "It was like the house was alive, watching us. Sometimes I could feel it waiting." The children noticed too. Dawn said, "I would wake up and see shadows standing at the end of my bed. I tried to scream, but nothing came out." Heather recalled the dolls would move on their own. One night, they were all facing the corner, like they were scared too. Ooh, terrifying. The twins described their own experiences. Shannon said, "I saw a man in the hallway. He didn't have a face. He just stared at me and disappeared." Karen added, "Sometimes I felt hands grab my ankles when I was in bed, and no one was there." Janet described hearing whispers calling her name and feeling unseen hands tug at her hair. The house seemed alive, reacting to the family's presence, feeding on their fear. Janet would later say, "It wasn't just the noises or the smells, it was the way it made us feel. It was like living with something that wanted us to be afraid." And now I'll go into some of their coping strategies they tried to enforce. Desperate to regain control, the family tried everything. Janet placed crucifixes in every room. Jack installed locks, checked wiring, and had the house inspected. Priests came to bless the home, and the family prayed constantly. Janet said, "We were begging for help, anything to stop it. Sometimes I thought it was listening and laughing at us. Yet, the entity persisted, sometimes striking harder after each attempt to repel it. Objects moved, scratches appeared, and shadows grew bolder." Even with faith and vigilance, the Smurls were forced to confront an undeniable truth. This was no ordinary haunting, no ordinary spirit. Janet reflected, "We were constantly on edge, watching, listening, waiting for the next thing to happen. It was like living in a war zone, only we couldn't see the enemy." Shannon later added, "I didn't want to sleep alone. I was always scared it would grab me." And now I have other quotes from the family about the hauntings. So I'm going to start with Janet Smurl, the wife of the family. And she says, "Every time a priest came and blessed the house, it would calm down for a little while. You could feel it pulling back, almost like it was assessing the new threat, but it never left, never truly. Sometimes I thought the prayers worked. The banging would stop, the shadows would retreat. And then, as soon as we thought we were safe, it would return, way angrier than before. I would hear it whispering, almost laughing after the blessings. It was like it was daring us to try again." Jack Smurl, the husband, said, "The first time a priest blessed the house, it was quiet for a night, but by the next morning, the furniture had been knocked over again, the smell was back, and the children were terrified. It was almost as if it was testing us, pushing the limits of what we could endure after each intervention." Then we go on to Dawn Smurl, the daughter. "When Lorraine Warren came, it got quieter for a while. I could sleep better at night, but I knew it was still there, watching." Heather Smurl, the other daughter. "The house felt calmer after the prayers, like it was holding its anger, but then little things would start again. A door slamming, a cold spot, a whisper. It never went away completely." And then lastly, I have the two twins, Shannon Smurl. "Sometimes after the blessings, I could see it moving more slowly. I felt safer for a moment, but I knew it was just waiting for us to relax." And lastly, Karen Smurl, the other twin. "The crosses and prayers helped, but it didn't leave. It just got quieter for a little while, then it came back stronger. That's when we really understood how powerful it was." Escalation in violent hauntings. By the early 1980s, the activity turned violent. Invisible hands pushed and scratched Janet. Jack was shoved downstairs, and the children's beds shook violently. The entity displayed grotesque sexual aggression towards Janet, and levitations of furniture and objects became common. Temperatures dropped without cause, and shadows appeared that no one could explain. Janet later said, "We were no longer living in our home. We were living in its world, and it ruled every corner of it." Jack added, "I felt like we were being hunted. Every corner of the house was a trap." Dawn recalled, "Sometimes I would hide under the blankets and pray it wouldn't find me." Heather added, "It felt like it was waiting for us to do something wrong so it could punish us." The family realized they need outside help, experts who could confront a force far beyond their understanding. And before I go into that part about the experts, about the Warrens, I put in here some of the community church help that they try to get. The Smurls sought help from local priests who blessed the house multiple times. Some neighbors reported witnessing strange occurrences, while others whispered doubts. Ed and Lorraine Warren arrived. Lorraine described a demonic presence attached to the house for decades, feeding on the family's fear. Lorraine said, "It was one of the most vicious entities I've ever encountered. It thrived on terror." Ed emphasized this was no ordinary spirit. It wanted control, and it wouldn't give up. Janet recalled, "Ed and Lorraine gave us hope. For the first time, we felt like someone understood what we were facing. But even with them, the house never stopped being terrifying." Shannon said, "I felt safer when Lorraine was there. She told us it wasn't our fault." I mean, just imagine you see stuff floating in your house, you get scratches, your bed is shaking. That is just horrifying. And literally everyone in the family has experienced it. It's not just the parents, it's not just a singular child, it's the whole house. I'm sure they didn't sleep or anything during this time. I mean, I don't know how they lived here for so long despite all that. So now we're going to get into the Warrens' investigation. When the Smurls realized that the haunting was way beyond anything they could handle, they called on Ed and Lorraine Warren, renowned paranormal investigators. The Warrens arrived in the early 1980s, prepared to confront a force that had tormented the family for years. Lorraine Warren, a clairvoyant and demonologist, immediately sensed the entity's presence. She described it as a vicious, intelligent, and malevolent force that had lashed onto the house decades earlier. Ed Warren, focusing on physical evidence, began cataloging every strange occurrence, like furniture that moved on its own, lights flickering without cause, doors opening and slamming, and objects levitating. The Warrens meticulously recorded every incident. Lorraine reported witnessing the entity directly, a dark, shapeless figure radiating hatred. Ed focused on physical evidence, like I said before, furniture moving, lights flickering, doors slamming. Janet and Jack provided detailed accounts of being attacked. Scratches, bruises, objects hurled, and beds violently shaken. The children corroborated the sightings of shadows and figures. Lorraine noted this entity was intelligent. It wanted to dominate the family, and it wouldn't give up. Ed said, I've investigated many hauntings, but the aggression here was extreme. This was something truly malevolent. Which is, they dealt with Annabelle. I can't imagine something that's worse than that, but whew, that is crazy. Dawn recalled, I could hear it whispering outside my door. It knew I was awake. Karen added, even when I stayed with my mom, I felt like it was watching us. Janet Smurl recalled, when Ed and Lorraine arrived, it was like the house went silent for the first time in years. And we knew it was only watching, waiting to see what they would do. The Warrens interviewed each family member individually. The daughters shared chilling firsthand accounts. Dawn said, when Lorraine came into the room, it seemed to shrink back, like it was afraid of her. For the first time, I could sleep without feeling its hands on me. Heather recalled, the shadows didn't move as much while they were there, but I could still feel it breathing behind the walls. It was clever, like it knew how to hide. Shannon added, sometimes I could see objects levitate, and Lorraine would calmly say it was warning us, not attacking, but it felt very real. And Karen said, it hated them. I could feel its anger, but it couldn't touch us as long as they were around, meaning the Warrens. Ed Warren observed, I've seen aggressive hauntings before, but this one was different. The entity was highly intelligent. It responded to human intervention. It was testing us, taunting us, and feeding off fear. The Warrens conducted multiple blessings and protective rituals. During these rituals, they noticed that the entity would often react violently at first, banging on walls, throwing objects, and creating cold spots, but the intensity sometimes subsided once the rituals concluded. Janet Smurl noted, after a blessing, it would pull back for a moment. I could finally breathe, but I knew it wouldn't return. I knew it wouldn't return stronger if we faltered. Lorraine explained, some spirits or entities are not passive. They resist expulsion. This one was tethered to the property and fed on the family's fear. It wasn't evil in the sense of being human. It was malevolent energy given form and intent. The Warrens also investigated the physical environment. They noted the house sat over old coal mine tunnels, a factor that may have contributed to the accumulation of negative energy. Lorraine theorized that old trauma and residual energies can create fertile ground for entities like this, and she suggested that the malevolent force had likely existed long before the Smurls moved in. Despite the detailed investigation, the entity never fully left. Temporary relief would follow each intervention, a quiet night, a calm day, objects remaining in place, but the haunting always returned, demonstrating the entity's persistence and intelligence. Jack Smurl reflected, it was testing us constantly. They could see it calculating, deciding when to act. The Warrens helped us survive it, but they couldn't make it go away completely. And then I put in here detailed nights during the Warrens' investigation because I was interested to know kind of how long they stayed there and what happened each night. So night 1, arrival and first impressions. When Ed and Lorraine arrived, the family prepared them for the worst. Janet recalled, the house went silent the moment they stepped inside, but I could feel it waiting, watching. The first night, the children reported shadows moving down hallways. Shannon said, I saw something tall in the corner of the living room. It didn't move, but it looked right at me. Then it was gone. Ed observed sudden cold spots and heavy air in the main living room areas. Lorraine explained, this is a very strong entity. It reacts to the presence of people it can't dominate. That's why it went quiet at first. It was assessing the Warrens. Despite initial calm, objects began to shift at night. Dawn said a chair moved across the room, slowly, like it didn't want to be noticed. Night 2, first blessings and backlash. The Warrens performed a house blessing that evening. Janet recalled, the moment the priest said the final prayer, it shrieked, like a voice but not human. Then it went silent. For a moment, I thought we were free. Jack added, we saw objects move violently for a few seconds, then everything stopped. It was almost like it was testing our faith. Lorraine noted that this temporary calm often followed aggressive resistance. Entities like this will lash out before retreating. They don't give up willingly. The children slept somewhat better that night, but whispered voices woke them intermittently. Heather said, I heard it calling my name over and over, soft but angry. I pulled the blanket over my head and prayed. Night 3, furniture levitation and physical attacks. So by the third night, the entity escalated. Chairs and small tables levitated and crashed to the floor. Janet recounted, I tried to grab the chair as it floated, but my hands couldn't touch it. It slammed into the wall with a force that made me stumble backward. Jack experienced physical aggression. Something shoved me while I went down the stairs. No one was there, but I hit the floor hard. The children were terrified. Karen said, I felt hands on my ankles like it was trying to pull me under the bed. Lorraine interpreted this as a demonstration of the entity's strength and focus, saying it knows it can't fully overpower adults in the presence of the Warrens, so it strikes the children more due to this. Night 4, shadow figures and whispers. By the fourth night, shadow figures appeared more frequently. Dawn reported, I saw a tall black figure in the hallway. It didn't move toward me, but I could feel its anger. It was waiting, like it wanted me to run. Whispering intensified. Shannon recalled, it whispered bad things, calling us stupid, calling us weak. I knew it wanted to scare us into giving up. Lorraine noted, intelligent entities will communicate to instill fear. It's a tactic, not random. This one is cunning. Night 5, temporary calm and strategic retreat. After several days of intense activity, the house seemed to settle. The Warrens performed another blessing and encouraged prayers in every room. Janet remembered, for the first time we could breathe in the house. The shadows seemed smaller, and the whispering stopped for a while. Dawn said, it didn't disappear. I could feel it hiding in the corners, watching us. But for a few hours, it was quiet. This temporary relief gave the family hope, showing that rituals and faith could weaken the entity, even if it couldn't fully remove it. Night 6, the entity tests boundaries. Despite the calm, the entity quickly resumed activity once the Warrens left. Jack reflected, it knew it had to wait until the adults weren't present. That's when it attacked more boldly, scratching doors, moving beds, whispering threats. Heather added, even with crosses and blessings, it still tried to scare us. It wanted to prove it could control us when we weren't paying attention. Lorraine concluded, entities of this kind are persistent. They can't be reasoned with. They adapt, they wait, and they exploit fear. The Smurls survived because they never gave up. Night 7, the Warrens' final observations. By the final night of the documented investigation, the entity's activity had reached a plateau. The family reported fewer violent attacks, though shadows and whispers remained. Janet said, it was quieter, but I could feel its hatred. It wasn't gone. It was just waiting for the next family to move in. Lorraine reflected, this was one of the most aggressive and intelligent hauntings we've ever encountered. It wasn't random, it was strategic, malevolent, and relentless. The Smurls' courage and faith were what saved them. Through their investigation, the Warrens documented countless pieces of evidence, from bruises and scratches on family members to inexplicable furniture movements. They confirmed that this was one of the most aggressive and dangerous hauntings they had ever encountered. Lorraine later said, I've faced many spirits and entities, but this one had a mind of its own. It had hatred, focus, and a plan. The Smurls survived because they refused to give in to fear and because they had support. Many families aren't so fortunate. This investigation cemented the Smurl case as one of the most famous hauntings in American paranormal history. The Warrens' reports, coupled with the family's testimony, provide a chilling account of how a malevolent entity can interact intelligently with humans, attacking, retreating, and adapting in response to intervention. And now we'll go a little bit into the media, the public reaction, and really what the neighbors were thinking. The story attracted national attention. Newspapers, television crews, and paranormal enthusiasts descended on West Pittston. Some sympathized, others doubted the family's accounts. Lorraine said, "Every time we documented something, there were people ready to dismiss it. The fear in that house was real." Janet reflected, "We weren't just living with a demon, we were living under a microscope. The world was watching, but it didn't matter. The terror in our home didn't stop because people were looking." Sharon added, "People came to see us, but they didn't understand. They never felt it. If they just stayed in their house for one night, I'm sure they'd believe the hauntings. That's crazy." So the resolution and aftermath. By the mid-1980s, the haunting decreased. The combined efforts of the Warrens, local priests, and the family's faith seemed to weaken the entity. Janet said, "We survived because we refused to give in to fear. Every day was a battle, but we knew that together, with faith and courage, we could withstand it." Ed Warren called it one of the most aggressive hauntings he ever encountered. Lorraine added, "It served as a warning. Some forces are not only persistent, they are purposeful." The Smurls finally moved out in 1987. New occupants reported little to no activity. The case remains a staple in paranormal history, demonstrating the lengths the family went to endure something so horrible. Dawn reflected, "It changed me. I'll never forget the fear, but I also learned how strong we could be." Overall, Smurl haunting is a story of endurance, faith, and terror. It challenges our understanding of the unseen and reminds us that sometimes the forces in our world are far more relentless than we can imagine. And remember to follow us on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, and our podcast is posted to Podbean, YouTube, iHeartRadio, and Spotify, which is the main one we use, along with YouTube. And also just comment any future podcasts you would like. I'm always looking for ideas. I always have to ask AI for more ideas on what to research and talk about. But overall, I want to leave you with a thought. So the next time you walk into a quiet, empty house, remember the Smurls and ask yourself, what unseen presence might be watching?